Welcome to the Indomitable Podcast. I'm your host, Di Cerullo, and today we have another great episode that will leave you inspired. Today's guest is the indomitable Brian D. Smith. Brian is a certified grief educator, life coach, and public speaker. He is well-versed in guiding individuals through profound loss and personal transformation. His journey into grief support was ignited by the sudden loss of his daughter, Shana, in 2015. This pivotal event spurred his mission to not only navigate his own grief, but to also help others on their healing paths. Well, that is a tremendous life purpose. Hello, Brian. I am so grateful to have you here today.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. And I don't think I've ever been called indomitable before, but I love it.
Oh my gosh, you got to use it. I mean, yeah. I would say that I have small regrets about naming the book that, just in the sense that I have to be able to say it so regularly without goofing it. But honestly, it's exactly what I meant to say. So why don't you tell those of us who are listening and just sort of meeting you for the first time a little bit about yourself?
My name is Brian Smith. I am, as you said, a certified grief educator. What I do is I help people when they're suffering from loss. Usually it's a loss of a loved one. So people who have gone through events and just trying to figure out, how do I get back on my feet again? How do I figure out this thing called life? Yeah. I started doing this particular work after my daughter passed away. My 15-year-old daughter, she passed away in June of 2015. So it'll be 9 years next month as we're recording this. Mm-hmm. And I found that I felt like life had defeated me, and that I had been dominated by life in a certain sense. And it took me a long time to get back on my feet and get my bearings again. So what I want to do is help other people to figure that process out. How do we take those tragedies in life and come back from them?
Right. Wow. That is a tremendous journey to have to manage. If we never get more than we can handle, you must be made out of some really strong stuff. So I'm very excited to have this conversation with you. Give us some background. How did we get here?
Well, that's the start of this particular part of my journey. It's funny. I think life goes through these different phases. So for me, I was raised in a religious background, a Christian background, and it never really sat right with me. This idea of heaven and hell and a God who judged us and original sin and all of that stuff. So my first few decades of life, I suffered from panic attacks. I had an intense fear of death, of dying young. It was really weird. I have this feeling that I was going to die young. So when I was in my mid to late 20s, I guess, I started just basically, I have to figure this whole thing out. What's going on here? What's going on with this religion that I've been taught about? Does this make any sense? So I did what's called a deconstruction. I basically just tore it all down and built from the foundation up. I read the entire Bible from Genesis to Revelation. I started reading other books, about things. So I was kind of just trying to figure out life in general. And I felt like I had a pretty good handle on, what was going on with life and death and all that kind of stuff. And then, as I said, my daughter passing kicked me into the next phase of what I do. Yeah. So that's kind of how I got to where I am today. This is what I do now. Is probably, we were talking with some friends at dinner last night. I think it's my fourth career. I started off as an engineer, so I've got a very rational engineering background, and then I was in corporate sales for a few decades, entrepreneur on my own business, selling hair and skincare products, and this is what I'm doing for the last phase of my life.
Talking to people like yourself is so incredibly, not even just profound, but especially on a podcast where you have to fill the time with conversation, and really you just kind of want to sit in what someone has said to you. I just want you to know that I do want to be sort of sitting here and just sort of receiving what you've said and kind of be like, wow, that's incredible. So you are going through these chapters, and really in the beginning you're kind of choosing your chapters, right? And then as you go, the more wisdom you accumulate, the more you realize you are being led on this path, right? How did you start from this point? I don't want to ask you too much that you're not sort of offering, but how did you start on this journey, on this new chapter in your life? Once you have this terrible, tragic event, how do you breathe again?
Yeah. Well, first of all, feel free to ask me anything, because as we were talking about earlier, we need to have these conversations
We
that are
do. Yeah.
uncomfortable.
Yes.
And we are so closed off, and we tiptoe around each other. We don't want to
Yes.
offend, and that's
Yes.
so fine. But I'm here to I want to break all that down. So
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
me, nothing's off limits.
Sure.
But how do you start? Well, what I've realized is that when we have these events, it either creates a strength in us or it reveals a strength that we didn't know we had. And I think it's a combination of both.
Right.
And I've had it's funny when you said, our kids are like our hearts. I remember before I had my first child, a friend of me saying, well, when you have a child, it's like taking your heart out of your body and letting it walk around in the world every day.
Yes,
And
that's
it's totally
exactly what it
exposed.
is.
Yeah. So we all, so many of us say, I could never survive if the death of my child. I couldn't do it. But you can. I'm part of an organization called Helping Parents Heal. We're about 25,000 members, I think, now. We've all survived the passing of a child. So it's something that can be done. I talk to parents all the time who've had a child pass in the spirit, and it does reveal something in us or create something in us that we weren't aware of. So we're a lot more resilient than we think. For me, I remember, there were several turning points, but it was a few months after Shana had passed, probably 6 or 8 months, and a friend had given me a gift of a medium reading.
Yes.
So I'm talking to the medium, and she's incredible. Her name is Suzanne Wilson, so she's just amazing. And she's telling me this stuff, and it's like she knew me. She knew my family. It's like all she knew was my first name.
Right.
But she said, "Your daughter is telling me that this had to happen. That this was planned. Wow. That this was part of your path. This is part of your journey." And again, 6 months after Shana passed, I had no idea I was going to be doing any of this stuff.
Of course.
And it's just like, you're going to write a book. You're going to be speaking. And I'm like, no. Wow. That's not going to happen. And I never heard of anything about soul planning before.
No.
It's a totally new concept to me. And the first thought is like, why would I plan this? No one in their right mind would plan something like this. So, but I'm open-minded enough to say, let me toy with this. What does this mean? And does this make any sense on any kind of level? And as I've been exposed to that idea more and more over the 9 years that it's been now, and it'll be 9 years next month, it starts to really make sense. And you look back at things in your life, and I just turned 63 on Sunday. So as you go through many decades and you look at many events, you start to see the patterns. You start to see how things are laid out. You see how the breadcrumbs are, things that lead you. Yeah. So with that experience, I've learned it through experience that I do believe these things are planned. Of course. So what I try to do now is help people as you're going through this. This is the challenge of being human.
Yes.
Is when you're going through it, being curious, keeping your eyes open, saying, what can this teach me? Yeah. How can I take this and transmute it or transform it into something else?
God, what did it teach you? What did you learn? What are you learning?
Well, I'm learning that, first of all, this life it's precious. It's fleeting. We're here. A lot of us, that's why I always smile when I say this, because I know some people say that we're not all here to learn, but most of us are here to learn. Some of us are here just to goof off, just like when you're in school.
Some of us are here to be mirrors for other people about what they would look like if they weren't learning. Yeah.
And there are some people that just aren't paying attention, but a lot of us, we're here to learn. We're here to learn. We're here to grow. We are here to face challenges. Yeah. The challenges that we go through in this life, they're not a bug. It's not an accident. It's not a punishment. It's a feature. It's what we came here to experience.
Yes.
And through these things, we can grow, we can learn, we can challenge, we learn love, we learn compassion. Right. And because of my podcast, interviewing people, because of the work I do, I have the privilege of being able to talk to people every day who have overcome like things that are unreal. I mean, it's not just, the loss of a child, but the loss of a child and then a spouse or cancer or their house burning down. Yeah. And all these things that we consider to be tragedies. But they're talking to me and they're like, I'm stronger for all of these things. And because of those things that I went through, now I'm doing this.
Right.
I've also learned that nothing here it's all temporary.
Yeah.
So I view life now as it's kind of like a lucid dream. Hopefully, a dream we become lucid in, but it's a dream. And I've
Right.
interviewed a lot of people that have had near-death experiences, and almost
Mhm.
universally, they describe, I was here and then I was there, and when I was there, it was like waking up. Like, oh,
Wow.
that was a really wild ride. That life felt very real. So if you've ever been in an intense dream, and you think it's real, and you're just all confused and everything, and you wake up in your bed and you go, that was just a dream. That's what it's like when we cross back over to the other side. It's like
Wow.
that was just a dream. So I just try to let things not roll off my back, because it's very real what we're going
Yeah.
through here, but not to get too caught up in the story, not to get too caught up in the play.
Right. Right. I mean, I think to myself all the time, I'm 40. I've gotten to the place where I'm like, it'll all work out. It's all going to be fine. It'll all work out. But I will be honest with you, that took me until I was 40. Like, I
Yeah.
was just like, I mean, I was all up in the story. I was all up in the thing. And as we think about, like, people will say to me all the time, I could never survive what you survived. But my mindset has always been, I would do it all again to keep my kids safe, to keep my partner safe. I would do it under the agreement that it was me, that I would live through that, I would survive all that, and I would go back to the beginning and start over again and do it exactly the same, just to keep those kids safe. You hold space for people who have survived the unimaginable.
Mm-hmm.
You must learn a new, incredible human condition learning every single day. So, what is your favorite thing that you have learned on this journey so far?
Wow. I think the biggest thing that I've learned is that it is just a journey.
Yeah.
This is not the whole ball of wax. We look at our lives like, oh, I hear people say that's the end of my life, or that's the end of it. There is no end of your life.
Right.
We are eternal beings. I was listening to a guy the other day that I listen to a lot of podcasts, and he said, we all get a standing ovation, which I never heard it put that way before. Just being a human being is a very difficult, very precious, very sought after thing that souls want to come in and have this experience. So even though life sometimes feels like, I don't want to do this anymore, it's something that we signed up for, and we looked very much forward to doing.
Right.
So I try to maintain that sense of life is precious, but it's also not that big of a deal, because we can't lose. You cannot fail at life.
Right.
And the things that you went through, the things that I've gone through, nothing's ever lost.
Yeah.
It all serves a purpose. And I love what you said about, like, I would do this again for them.
Yes.
There's a concept that I've learned along the way. It's a series of books called The Team, and it's written by a woman named Frances Key, and it's channeled from her mother, who's in spirit, who's writing back through her. And there's this concept that we are not individuals. We are here to serve our team. And so when we go through these things that are so horrific, it can vicariously, our team can learn through us, so they don't have to go through it. So it's literally taking one for the team.
Right.
And so I think of, like, okay, well, what I've gone through has been beneficial to me, but not just to me, it's to my team, and ultimately to all of humanity, because we're all learning and growing together.
Wow. So everything is your favorite then? Every learning is accumulating for your team. That's
But I guess if I had to pick the one thing, it would be that everything's going to be okay, as you said. John Lennon said, everything will be okay in the end, and if everything's not okay, it's not the end.
Not the end.
And that's one of my favorite quotes. It's never over.
Wow. That's amazing. It's funny that you say that, because my kids they look, you would have to know me to know this, but my kids look exactly like my birth father and his sister, right? So as I continue, I look over at them sometimes and I wonder, how many times has this exact combination, this exact iteration been passed down in my family until we get this right? Like, I will look at the life my birth father has lived. I will look at the experiences he's had, and I will think, how much will my son not have to overcome as a result of me having to go through those things first, as him passing those experiences down, me learning from those experiences and changing the game. But, my husband and I always say we're raising astronauts. And what I mean by that is we have no idea. We are raising them for the world we currently live in, and they will stand in a world that we can't imagine, right? And so it's incredible to me how much learning there is as human beings. And the fact that you stand even farther forward than even me, you're on a different planet, like waving down, like, hey, Di. And I'm just like, what would I even say to you? So what do people usually ask you? What is a piece of advice you could pass down to the rest of us who are like living in this spot?
Yeah, well, it's a great question, and I appreciate the confidence in where I am, but I'm also a couple of decades older than you are, so I've been around for a while.
Saying.
Yeah, I've been around for a while. The thing is, the number one message that I want to give to people is that you will survive this.
Yeah.
It feels like you won't, and it feels like you don't want to. So when I'm talking, one of the things I very much want to bring forward is, again, for me, it's been 9 years, and it was 4 or 5 years before I even got close to the point I'm at now.
Right.
When a parent loses a child, in particular, those are people I work with most often, you want to follow your child. You want to be where they are.
Yes.
Your job is to protect them. There's a lot of times there's guilt involved, there's anger involved, there's all kinds of stuff, and you feel again like you're never going to be who you were, and you won't be who you were. You're going to be somebody different. It definitely does change you.
Right.
But so people ask me about that. People ask me, how do I get over the guilt? Guilt is a big thing that I deal with. And again, not just with losing a person, but for a lot of things. We take things upon ourselves. We feel like this is my fault, whatever it is that's happened to you.
Yeah.
And funny, it's kind of funny because now there's this concept of karma has become a big deal in the West, and people misunderstand it. Like karma is like punishment, right? I talked to someone just the other day, and they're like, they had lost a son, and they're like, what did I do? What did I do in this life or a past life that is causing me to be punished to lose my son? Well, first of all, losing a child is not your punishment. It's not their punishment for their past things. It's just like, stop saying those things. We don't deserve bad things.
No.
But it's taking those things apart. The biggest thing about being human is like facing up to these challenges and going through them, and learning from them, growing from them. So I love the analogy. There's a lot of analogies we use for Earth. Some call it a school. Some call it. My favorite is probably it's like an obstacle course. It's like I love watching like extreme stuff on TV. And I remember there's a few series a few weeks ago, like what the Marines go through, or the Navy SEALs when they go through Hell Week.
Right.
I mean, they practically kill those guys. In fact, a few of them don't make it.
Of course.
But they go through that because they want to be the best of the best. And once they've gone through that, they've got these skills that we all just marvel at.
Right.
That's what Earth is like. The guy, his name is Christian Sundberg, and he remembers pre-life memories, and he says he's like in the in-between place. He's walking around, and he sees this being that's just like incredible. That's just putting off all this stuff that he wants, wisdom and patience and understanding and all that. And he approaches this being, is like, "What did you do? How did you get to be the way you are?" And he's like, "I went to Earth." And Christian's like, "I want that." And the guy, that's what they all say. No, are you sure this is what you want? So everybody, if you're here, you're a badass. And my clients, when I look at them, I don't see victims. I don't see people that I don't feel sorry for them. I'm like, you're a warrior because you chose this path and you're walking this path.
Right. That's incredible. What part of the grieving process are people usually at when they reach out to you?
When they reach out to me, they've usually been through traditional counselors. They've talked to their pastors. They've been frustrated by lack of understanding of that a lot of times they've lost their faith if they had faith.
Yes.
They're questioning what kind of a God would do this.
Right.
I mentioned earlier, guilt and anger are huge parts of whenever I work with someone. That's the first thing I'm looking for is like, do you think this was your fault? Do you think this
Sure.
was somebody else's fault? So they're usually at that stage, the stage of frustration, but the stage of also at least knowing they want to move forward. I've been very fortunate. It's interesting when people reach out to me, they seem to almost always be ready. Someone just set up an appointment with me the other day, a preliminary call, and they canceled and said, "I don't think I'm ready yet." And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, that's fine because not everybody's ready. And I've only had one person I've had to turn down who just
Yes.
it was just like they weren't ready. She just
Right.
wasn't ready to face it. So you have to be willing to and able to move forward. But what I tell people is you don't actually have to believe you can move forward. Just have that little bit of desire, right?
Right.
Just that little bit of hope. I'm like, if you have that little bit of hope, then we can work with that.
Right. I'm trying to use my own sort of trauma lens to find the language about how we would communicate about that kind of healing. Sometimes when I was looking forward and thinking how I wanted to heal, how I wanted to get better, I didn't realize at the time how much I had to hold on to the story, how much I had to make the story a part of me, how much I had to live in the story, and how I wasn't ready to let go of it, how I wasn't ready to let go of that as my identity because I wasn't ready to not feel like that anymore, right? Somehow it felt as if I put it down, then it was over, and then what was next, right? And so sometimes I feel like when people are talking to me, especially in this position as a podcaster, somebody who interviews people, sometimes they don't want to let it go. They want to stay in that space of always being in grief because it makes them feel closer to it somehow. It's comfortable.
Yeah.
Do you experience that as well with your with clients that you are working with, that sometimes it's not even necessarily that they aren't ready to face it, is that they don't want to be on the other side of it? Is that true for that kind of grief as well?
It's a very strange, counterproductive phenomenon, and I went through it myself.
Me too. I mean, not that. Yeah.
One of my ancestors is Thomas Jefferson.
That is incredibly awesome, first of all, and I have to just take a second because I love history and acknowledge how cool that is. Very cool. Please continue. Sorry to interrupt.
So it's interesting. It's been said that when his wife passed,
right,
that he was like melancholy and said, I'm never going to get over this. So I'm like, okay, well, that's going to be my legacy.
Right.
I'm going to be the person. They're going to say Brian was never the same, that, he loved Shana so much that he just, was never the same. And then I realized, first of all, that's not good for anybody around me.
No.
So I actually went to a grief meeting with some parents who had lost children, and this woman was like that. And I remember walking out of the room and saying, I don't want to be that person in 10 years because I can't do that to my whole family. Secondly, it's not fair to my daughter.
Yeah.
So, but there is this sense, and I've even heard people say, the more you love, the deeper the grief.
Yeah.
So we said, well, I'm going to prove I love more than anybody. I'm just going to be miserable.
Yes.
You can hold on to the love and let go of the pain. You don't have to live with that pain, that deep, burning, searing pain for the rest of your life. Your loved one doesn't want that for you.
Right.
And even if you've just gone through trauma, it's not losing a person. If you've been the victim of abuse or something, take what that taught you, take that forward with you. That is a part of who you are. That is part of what made you who you are. But that's not who you are. You're not what happened to you. And you don't have to be defined by that.
Right. So you're saying you can take the lessons and leave behind the pain and still leave with something positive that you can teach other humans at this school of life, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's an incredible lesson. All the best people that I ever meet have one thing in common, and that is that they have become the person that they needed in their worst moment. It is so obvious to me that that is what you have done as well. You became that person that you would want to reach out to in that terrible, tragic moment. And I think that's an incredible life goal for anybody that's in that place or any other place, truly. How does community help us heal?
We're not meant to go through these things alone. Again, part of our culture is we're so isolated, we're so lonely. They're showing, they're talking about now, people are depressed and anxious, even though we're surrounded by people. The way the community helps is you feel heard, you feel understood, which we all need. People have what they consider to be crazy thoughts. This thought is crazy. I shouldn't be thinking this. There's something wrong with me.
Yeah.
So we're able to share openly with oh yeah, I went through that. One of the things, again, in grief, when we lose someone as close as a spouse or a child, oftentimes we want to go with them.
Right.
And if you say that to someone, oh, you're suicidal, or people think that's morose, and it's like, no, it's natural. It's natural. You want to be where your child is. It doesn't mean that we're planning on harming ourselves.
Right.
And I remember, you said being the person that, I would want to be there for me. Back when Shana first passed, I remember listening to a podcast, and this woman, she had written a book, and she said, after my daughter passed or died, I was standing on the corner, the bus was coming by, and I would just step out in front of the bus.
Yes.
Most people wouldn't say that out loud, and they certainly wouldn't say it on a podcast, but it connected. I was like, I understand what you're saying, because I had those thoughts too. I never did it. I never planned to act on it. But her saying that made me feel not alone.
Right.
So I want to be able to be that place where people can say things like that, and other people say, yeah, I understand what you're saying. So that's what we do in the community. People can ask me questions. I have private podcasts for the people in the community. It's a application place you have to apply to be in, so we all know each other, and it's a small, intimate space where people can come in and just be themselves and share and help us heal each other. One of my favorite quotes is by Ram Dass. He says, "We're all just walking each other home."
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, we're here to support each other as we journey.
Why do you think the narrative around healing is written by people who aren't or haven't experienced any of those things? Because I am hearing you say, oh, people would say that was crazy. People would say that was suicidal. But then when we talk to each other, it all makes sense. And that is much the experience that I've had growing up the way I grew up in foster care, having those sorts of abuse scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that people create entire sort of narratives when they don't even speak the language, if you will?
Yeah, I honestly don't know the answer to that. It's interesting, because when I tell people what I do, I work with people in grief. Well, I would have never chosen this. Like, as a kid, I said, I want to work with people in grief.
Yes.
It chose me. It's because of my life circumstance. Now it's funny because I trained with David Kessler, who is really, really well known in the grief circles and everything. And David says, and I don't want to misquote him, but basically something to the effect like, I was working with all these people, but until my son died, I didn't have any idea what I was doing. So I want to go back and apologize to all those people.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah, I didn't know. And my daughter's a mental health counselor, and when she was going through her training, the things that they were telling her, I'm like, yeah, Kayla, I know that's what they're telling you, and that's what they're telling you have to do, but no. And that's why most of my clients have been to traditional therapists, and sometimes you're still seeing them.
Yeah.
But they're like, they don't get it. They don't get it. They don't have the holistic approach. They don't understand that we are spiritual beings.
Yes.
They don't understand that grief is natural. It's not a disease. It's not a pathology.
Right.
It's not something that we're going to invent a pill, because there are people literally think that we can invent a pill that's going to cure people's grief. That's not going to happen. Even all the depression and anxiety we're going through right now, we're trying to treat it with pharmaceuticals, which have their place.
Right.
But the problem is spiritual. And you're not going to treat that with a drug.
Yeah. Right.
I'm like, this is where the evidence leads you. So when I work with people, because people have asked me, well, do I have to believe what you believe to work with you? And I'm like, you don't have to believe it, but you have to be open to it, because I'm going to tell you why this is true. Not just this is true, but science is coming to this conclusion. Philosophy is coming to this conclusion. Religions have told us for thousands and thousands of years who we are and where we came from and where we're going. And we just threw that all away. So, just open your eyes and look at the evidence and point to where it obviously leads you. So I interviewed a guy recently in my podcast, and he talked about metaphysics. And I like that better than the word spirituality. Metaphysics says, okay, we're going to take what's physical, we're going to take the physics that we know, but we're not going to ignore things like ESP or reincarnation evidence or near-death experiences or mediumship. We're going to take the whole thing together. So that's a word I'm trying to move more towards rather than spiritual.
A lot of times friends of mine that are going through grief have sort of pondered to me the fact that a lot of times people will just leave their lives and just disappear for a certain amount of time and just not be there because they don't have, again, the language of how they might speak to a person that's going through that. Was that your experience as well?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow.
I think probably every person I've worked through has experienced that with one or two or more people.
Right.
So there's two sides of that. One is, yes, there are people that will leave your life, and try not to take it personally. It's a shortcoming on their part. People are uncomfortable around death. They're uncomfortable around grief. They're scared to say the wrong thing, or you might make them sad, so they'll try to push you through your grief. Oh, you should be over this by now. Are you still, that kind of stuff. So you're probably going to lose some people, and it could be family, so get ready for that. But on the other hand, there are people that'll come into your life, and this has been my experience, that you didn't think were going to be there, that you had no clue were going to become your new family.
Right.
And I think about right now, we have a group of neighbors. We've lived here for over 20 years, and we have I have two girls, and my two girls were friends with all these people that had girls, just coincidence. And we call ourselves family, for friends and family. And we get together all the time. We go on vacation together. Yeah. And one of the couples, when Shana passed, my daughter passed, we became friends. We bonded around that. She came over. She walked with my wife every day. She would just walk and listen to her. They were doing, things for us to help us go through it, and hardly knew them before that. So those people will come into your life as well. So people come and go in life. It's okay. It's okay. We don't have to get upset about it. We don't have to get angry at them. It's like, okay, it's time for you to move out of my life, and someone else is going to come in.
Yeah. Sometimes you kind of outgrow people.
You do.
Yeah.
You do. We attract people by our vibrations. It's like a magnetic thing almost, but when we sync up a vibration, those are the people we attract. Right. As we grow spiritually, I've seen this happen with a lot of people. As we grow spiritually and we start to raise our vibration, some people are going to fall away.
Yeah.
They're not going to match. They're not going to want to be around you.
They're not going to want to be around you. I can be very triggering for people who don't want to move forward in their lives, who don't want to grow, who need to believe that they are being held back by, forces outside their control, and thus never need to sort of climb out of the crab bucket. It's too bad that we have to manage that on their behalf. What would you say to someone that is sort of feeling that loneliness and that loss because of this tragedy that they have experienced?
Find your community.
Yeah.
So it might be your family. It might not be your family. It might be your church. It might not be your church. After when my daughter passed away, my wife was like, we were going to this one church. It was a big evangelical church near us, and it was nice and had coffee and music and all the trappings.
All the trappings.
And I was like, I wasn't really into it anyway. I said, I can't go there anymore. I said, I just, so if you want to keep going to church, we've got to find somewhere else. Yeah. So we went somewhere else. Again, there might be some family members that, you just, so the spiritual path can be a lonely path. I think family is really important. I love family. I love my family. Yes. But those aren't necessarily, going back to soul planning and soul groups and stuff. Your family's not necessarily in your soul group. They might be, or they might not be. Right. It could be somebody that you meet on the street tomorrow that's in your soul group. Right. So life is, like I said, people come in, people go out. People play roles in our lives, and there's nothing wrong with letting that go when it's not serving both of you.
Yeah, well, you're so right. So if somebody is a person that is not experiencing the tragedy, but is supporting someone experiencing a tragedy, what are some actions that they can take? Because I know even just myself, I had a friend who called me when a person who was like a child to him passed, and I just had to sit there. I just let him talk. And I even often wonder now, is there more I could have done in that moment? And I still to this day, I can't think of anything. I'm still like, I think all I could do was sit there and receive it, right? Do you feel, as a person much more educated in that space, what things do you think people could do to support those individuals rather than just being afraid and untrained and running away?
Yeah, great. That is a fantastic question. When you talk to people that are in grief, the number one thing they want is for you to listen.
Yeah.
You don't have to offer a solution. You don't have to offer an answer. There is no answer.
There's no solution.
Don't have to don't sugarcoat it.
Yeah.
It's okay to say this sucks.
Yeah.
It's okay to say that I know you feel terrible.
Yeah.
You say all I could do is listen. That is the number one thing that people want. They want to be heard. They want to talk about their loved ones. They want to talk through, what's going on with them, or they might want to sit in silence. And sometimes you could just do that. That's okay too. You don't have to fill in every empty space. It's still really, it's still there are no magic words. We have a couple of friends. They each just lost a sibling, recently, and I'm like, okay, this is what I do. I help people in grief.
Right.
What am I going to say to them? It's like, I'm sorry. This sucks. I know you're going through a lot. If it's someone that that is really close to you, you can do practical things for them. Another thing, grievers, they get overwhelmed sometimes because people say, well, I'll do anything for you, just let me know what you need. And we don't know what we need. So offer practical, like making dinner for them or buying them a gift card to go out to a restaurant or something, cutting their grass. Just take some of those daily burdens, off of them. So little practical things like that can be very helpful. And just gestures that people, they know you care. One of the things after, this is really small, but after my wife's father passed, someone sent us wind chimes. And so every time we hear those wind chimes, we think of her father. So that's become a tradition for us. Whenever someone that we know loses someone, we send them a nice set of wind chimes because it's just a nice way to remember that person.
Right.
Things like that.
Yeah. Is it your experience that people will stop saying that person's name? Will they just talk around it?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because people don't like to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So, and people seeing other people sad makes us feel uncomfortable. So if they say that oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bring her. Well, first of all, she's always on your mind anyway. So just know that the grieving person, again, I work with a lot of parents. Yeah. Their child is never not on their mind.
Never not on their mind.
You haven't brought it up. You haven't made them sad.
Right.
So it's not a helpful strategy for the person that's in grief. In fact, it makes us feel uncomfortable because we want to know
you're uncomfortable,
right? So I do find that people do that, but again, and I was talking to a client just the other day, and it's like, it's terrible. I have to manage other people's things when I'm the one going through the grief, and I'm like, it does suck. It's unfair, but that's our burden because people are ignorant about how to handle grief. That's one of the reasons I wrote the book that I wrote, Grief and Growth, was to help people understand like things to say, things not to say. That I found, very unhelpful. I love talking about my daughter, I want to keep her memory with me. But people are different. I've worked with clients who said I took all the pictures down. I can't stand seeing pictures of my loved one. Well, you can tell I love seeing pictures of my daughter. Sometimes in that early part of the grief, people do want to put things away, for a while, but hopefully you get to the point where the memories are more important than the pain.
Right.
And you start to remember them as they're alive. One of the reasons I love like that particular picture of Shana, that was taken a few weeks before she passed. And when I still remember that day, and that's the way I want to remember her. But people get caught up in, if they found their loved one's body or if there's a particular place where the event happened, they just get caught up in their death as opposed to celebrating their life.
Right.
And so it's really important to try to remember to celebrate their life. And we bring up Shana all the time with,
Yeah.
with our friends and stuff. And if they're uncomfortable with it, then they can move on. Because
Right.
she's going to be part of our life for the rest of the time I'm here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So tell me the name of the book again.
It's Grief to Growth. Grief numeral 2 growth. So that's my podcast, my book, my website. Everything is under that.
Grief to Growth. Absolutely.
Yeah, that came to me, I said, about 4 or 5 years ago when I started this, and I'm like, there's a parable or thing that Jesus said about a seed of wheat falling to the ground, and he said, unless it falls to the ground and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it comes forth and produces much fruit.
Yeah.
And I think about that. It's like, again, all the tragedies that we go through in our life, we feel like this is it. I've been buried, right? But what if we looked at it as like, you've been planted. So you've been planted to grow and become something more than you were. And that's the lesson that I want to get out to people, that take whatever this thing that happened to you, and you can look at it as a victim. You can look at it as like, this was my bad luck. You can look at it like it was punishment. That is your choice. Or you can look at it like it was either divinely inspired or I planned it. That's fine. But even if you don't, what are you going to do with it? Because that is absolutely your choice. No matter what you believe, it's your choice what you do with it.
Absolutely. I completely agree that it's your choice what you do with it. Might not look that way now, but eventually it will. Eventually you'll come to a lot of different sort of forks in the road that maybe you might not see as a choice right in the beginning, but as you go, you start to see them as very obvious choices that become marked over time.
Yeah, that meeting I went to, again, a few weeks after Shana passed, and there was a woman there, and she was just miserable. Her daughter passed like 10 years before, and all she could talk about was how unfair it was, and she was going to the graveside, I think, like every day, and I'm like, okay, this is not a good plan. I don't want to be doing this in 10 years.
This isn't a long-term plan.
That was a turning point. That was a fork in the road where I said, okay, I'm going to do something different.
I am so grateful for this conversation. I cannot even tell you. This has been a very profound learning experience for me. So for that, I am very grateful for your time. So thank you for sharing with me. How else can people support you, follow you, and work with you?
Well, again, there's the book, the website. I have a podcast and a YouTube channel. So you can find me all those. You just Google Grief to Growth. You can find me there. I mentioned my community. So I started an online community in January. We're about 175 people, I think, at this point. It's a place to come. It's free. You can get support there.
Beautiful. Y'all, Brian has graciously sent me all of these links, which will be below in the show notes.
Thanks so much for having me.
I am so grateful. Thank you so much for being here. So y'all, thank you for tuning in today. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to the Indomitable Podcast for more incredible stories of humaning. Please remember that my new book, Indomitable, A Foster Care Story, is available wherever you get your books. And finally, as ever, I am so happy to have you in community here with me. And remember, together we are truly indomitable. Have a great week, everybody. Take care.